welcome to our webinar today. It's Olivia here, it's Olivia's voice you're hearing, and I'm joined today by Ariadne, who's head of art training here at Confidence Speak. And it's really lovely to see lots of familiar faces here and new faces. So hi to all the new people joining the call today. So as promised, we will be chatting about leadership presence. So if you've taken the time, it must mean you are curious about what this is all about. So what I'm going to be exploring today is what exactly leadership presence is. So it is a term that is thrown around a lot, so I want to unpack it. I also want to look at why it is important. So for you as a leader who's on the call today, why it's important for your growth, and more importantly, why it's important for driving the results that you want. So by the end, what I love is that you have some simple, actionable takeaways that will transform your leadership and certainly how you are experienced as a leader by those around you. So whether you are on the call today and you are new to leadership, you have a new team, you have a new organization, or you're struggling with a team to get them on board and to get them thriving, or look at if you're looking to move into a more senior role and indeed leave a lasting legacy. Whatever stage you're at in your career, wherever you find yourself, you're most welcome. You will get value from this webinar today. I can promise you that. So, as I said, Ariadne is on the call today, and she gets to speak to so many leaders, and she gets to design the programs here at Confidence Speak. So she speaks to lots and lots of people like yourselves. But she's very aware of what's top of mind for you. So today she's going to put herself in your shoes because you can't talk on this call, and she's going to ask the pertinent questions that you might be thinking. So Ariadne, welcome, and thanks for taking the time.
Thanks a million, Olivia. So hi, everyone. We only have an hour and we have a lot to get through. So before we kick off, a little bit of housekeeping. As I mentioned at the beginning there, we're going to keep our questions and answers to the end and leave the session open a few minutes. So if you have any questions, hang on to the end and you can ask them then. So leadership presence. I think we'd all like to hear what got you interested in this subject in the first place, Olivia.
Oh, wow.
The million-dollar question.
I've been interested in leadership presence for a long, long time. I actually, founded Confidence Speak. It's over 18 years ago. And I founded it because I was incredibly intrigued by professional performers, say actors and singers, how they created stage presence, how they had this confidence, how they really carried themselves. So I did this huge U-turn in my career, and I went off to drama school to study the techniques. And it was always my intention to come back to the corporate world and share these, in essence, performance techniques. So my focus back then was very much on vocal presence. So as a voice coach, how you sounded, physical presence, how you carried yourself, stage presence, your energy, your composure. And that, to me, combined with content crafting techniques, that to me was leadership presence. So what I found happening then was leaders would contact the business and they'd say something like, Olivia, I need to work on my leadership presence. I need to work on my executive presence. I've got feedback. And you'd ask them, so what's the specific feedback that you received? And I'm not joking. My golly, every single answer was different. It was, I need to have more charisma. I need to be more assertive. I need to walk the walk. I need to work on my accent. C-suite presenting, influence. I mean, it was an endless list. And for me, I found that lack of clarity really confusing and frustrating. And I know that leaders who really want to progress in their careers, they also found it very frustrating.
Absolutely. I mean, I spoke to a leader myself last week, and their interpretation was that leadership presence is all about presentation skills,
Mm.
storytelling. What
Mm.
would be your response to somebody maybe on
Oh, yeah.
the call today thinking that?
Again, yeah, like absolutely. And what I would say about that is I see presentation skills and storytelling as an absolute given. You absolutely
Mm,
need to have those skills. So
for
I don't know,
sure.
the term table stakes, come to mind. That's a given. So I knew, if I think back to the work I was doing, I knew I had some of the pieces that created leadership presence. Presentation skills, storytelling is also a part of it, but I absolutely knew there were missing pieces, and that's exactly what I endeavored to do. I wanted to find out what these missing pieces were, and really that's what this conversation, Ariadne, today is all about. It is about sharing what the missing pieces were.
Okay, and so moving on to what may seem an obvious question, what exactly is leadership presence? Can you define it for us,
Mm,
Olivia?
yeah, I mean, coming back to that frustration about not being able to have clarity around it. So,
Mm,
look, when I realized I had gaps in how I was supporting executives and leaders, I decided I need to go away and do some research around this. And for those of you who know me well, I'm not great at researching. So thankfully, I discovered a US based company called Bates Communications. Now, they had faced the same problem a number of years prior, but they actually decided to do deep research, deep analysis. They conducted interviews, and they collated all of the information that they could discover around leadership presence. And through that body of research, they were able to give it a very, very clear definition. And I'd love to share that definition with you. Um, it is a set of qualities in a leader that engage, inspire, align, and move people into action. So, in essence, Ariadne, it is about a set of behaviors that are
mm,
experienced by those around you on a daily basis. And it's very much about, if we think about that again, how do you engage your team? How do you inspire them? How do you align them? Moving towards execution of whatever it is. So, what I can tell you is that it is not about a personality and it is not presentation skills.
mm.
It's so much more. And really, when we think about the behaviors, what we're really looking about at here is what does success look like for the leader? So, what is top of mind? What is important for the leader? And then we look at what are the behaviors that will support that leader. And for me, I'll be honest, having the definition was powerful to have something to anchor to. So when leaders came on a call and, were looking to dial up their leadership presence, immediately there is a definition that can be shared with them. And I think that's critical for leadership presence and understanding of it.
Absolutely, and I think it's a really valuable to have that definition. So just going back to it again, it's a set of behaviors that engage, inspire,
Mhm.
align, and move
Mm.
people to action. So with that in mind, can you now explain to everyone listening why is leadership so important and why should we care about it?
Yeah, leadership presence, why it's important. And look at everybody on this call today. You're here because you want to make a difference and
Hmm.
you want to get results. And I do believe that in order for you to be successful with that, you cannot do all of the work yourself. You
Yeah.
have to rely heavily on those around you. And I think then, in order, if you're relying heavily on those around you absolutely need to have engagement. You need to have the buy in. You need to have better, what's the word, like connectedness, if
Mm.
that indeed is a word. Because if you don't have that, you're not going to have the support to get the success that you're looking for. So
Yeah.
with that in mind, if you're relying on people, how are you experienced? What is your leadership presence? And I think, when Bates Communications did this research, what they did, they created a model to help leaders to actually be able to measure their leadership presence. So all of a sudden, there's scientific data for those who love the data here. Very much a data-driven tool to support leaders. And it's a couple of years ago I trained and became certified in the model. But I think as I'm talking about the model here, that's not what this is about today. So for those of you on the call, I'm not saying, oh, here's the model and you have to go away and do the 360 assessment. What I'd love today is for you to simply be aware that there is a model, there are a set of behaviors, there is a definition, and to see really where you sit within all of that.
Yeah, and again, as you say, it's not about the 360 today, but you do use this model, the Bates XPI model, every day to measure
Mhm.
leadership presence with your clients, and it's a
I never
useful
liked the
tool.
name EXPI. It feels funky.
It does, it does. But you use it, and
Yeah.
maybe you can explain to people listening today what it is, and maybe break it down a bit for our listeners.
So I should say, I did, for those of you who have access to the comments here, you can click in. I shared a visual that might help you. So I think click on comments and it's there. But
Yeah.
essentially, if we're thinking about the structure of this, think of it like this. You've got three different dimensions, and I'm going to call that the three faces of a leader. So the first one is character. And that very much explores how you build trust with those around you. So in essence, I see that as your internal face. You then have substance. So how are you creating credibility with those around you? And our final one then is style. And I see this as the external facing leader. And style is all about how are you communicating to drive action.
Okay.
So that there are three dimensions, or three faces, and within each of those, you've got 5 behaviors. So it's broken down really clearly. It's very intuitive. And I think what I would say is that front and center of this is so you as a leader, what are your business goals? And that's really clearly defined. And then we work back and go, okay, now what behaviors need to be really experienced by those around you? And if I'm to give you sort of an example here, let's just say your role as a leader was very much about driving projects and executing on projects,
Yeah.
or say you're implementing change or creating, innovation. So we're very much tuned into what's the goal and then what the behaviors are. So your leadership presence is tied to real-time goals, real-time challenges. So it's not some, simple way of being like you have charisma or you have gravitas. It's very real and it's very measurable based on a set of behaviors. I
Okay.
hope
And
that's
so,
clear for our audience today.
yeah, no, I think that is clear. You mentioned that there's 5 behaviors within the 3 dimensions of character. We're not going to cover all of those today, but I'm going to ask you about a couple if that's okay.
Yeah.
So you say character is connected to building trust. Can you explain why trust is so important?
Yeah, character, the dimension of character, it's all about trust. And I mean, I suppose I mentioned earlier, as a leader, all of you on the call today, you are relying on people. So if you don't have the trust of those people, you're going nowhere. And so if we take a look at the facets, the behaviors for a moment, they're kind of at the core, at the heart of who we are. So some of the behaviors here are authenticity, concern, integrity, humility, restraint. And it's really interesting. People can be so busy executing and hitting deadlines that they neglect this whole area of building trust. And it's really interesting. I had a client quite recently, and it was interesting. He was very strong in this whole area with his direct reports of really building trust. But then he was like, Olivia, but sure, that's all well and good. But if you're not getting the results, if you're not, achieving your goals, you're failing. And I had to call him out and say, hold on, that's not the case. Because if you don't have the trust, you certainly won't be, reaching those goals and executing on your projects. So it was an interesting one for him to go, oh, okay. And an important moment for him to go, okay, I really need to own these strengths and qualities that I have. And just one more final thing I'd like to just mention. As I mentioned earlier, Bates Communications, created the model, collated all the data, and they revisited it a number of years after it was originally, created. And they were looking to see our particular behaviors associated with, certain leaders' focus. And one thing that they found was for people who are involved in innovation, for people who are involved in change, the automatic assumption is that it's very action-oriented, pushing things forward and executing. But actually what was discovered was that this whole dimension of character around building trust was actually front and center, more important than the action bias that people have. So it was an interesting finding to come out of a revisit.
So clearly, trust is really important. You also mentioned that character is linked to authenticity, and that really jumped out to me there. Authenticity is a word we often hear. It's bandied around a lot. But what does it actually mean in this context? And why does a leader or somebody listening here today need it?
And I think, Ariadne, the word jars with people. What is authenticity? Because it means different things to different people. And what I would say is I'm going to come back to the model, because I love the fact that it's very clearly defined, and then see how it lands for you. So authenticity is honest, unguarded, real. You say it as it is. And that the team around you, whether they are direct reports or peers, that they get a sense of what you're thinking and what you're feeling. So there's an openness there. You are sharing your story.
Yeah.
That is, that you're transparent. And I think it comes back to just that human to human connection. It's interesting, as I said there a moment ago, it means different things to different people. I had a client, and when I spoke to him last week, he was based in South Africa. He had worked in Canada, he had worked in the States, he'd worked in Europe, all over. And he said authenticity means something very different in each of those different countries. And, I had to agree with him, but it is about finding that connection with the people that are in front of you and what feels right. And I think that's why story is used so much. And it probably is, Ariadne, why we're contacted about how do I tell stories? How do I integrate stories into my presentations? And I think just if I'm to, make a comment here about what's going on stateside for people who've dialed in from America today, I do think the recent Democratic convention was quite interesting with, Kamala Harris and her running mate, Tim Walz. The content of their messaging, and I would throw the Obamas into the mix there, was all about the trust piece, the authenticity, the humility and the integrity. They're really trying to establish that trust. And that is how they're doing it, is through the use of story and personal personal anecdote, personal experiences. So it will be interesting to see once they develop that trust, what happens from there. But that was very evident to me as I watched the various speakers on that campaign.
Yeah, we'll be watching that, I'm sure. Another word that really jumped out to me is the word humility. And I know that's linked to authenticity. Humility isn't something that leaders might naturally associate with success or driving results. What would you say to that?
Yeah, you're probably right. And if we come back to, again, how the model introduces it, and really it's looking at the idea that you're admitting that I don't have all the answers, and that you're acknowledging that the people around you have value, and it's about you respecting the value and their ideas. In a way, it's acknowledging our own limitations. And there's discomfort. There's no doubt there's discomfort around that. So it's about really being curious to the people around you. And I think it's funny. And I do meet leaders and they think that they're really humble. And it's often that's not experienced by the people around them. And if I'm to kind of think about some people that I'm working with, you've got subject matter experts and you have some leaders who have very long tenure. And I think it's really hard for them to admit their limitations and admit that they don't have all the answers. So, or the fact, are they open to, younger people sharing their ideas? So there's a real struggle there sometimes. And I love this quote. A good friend of mine shared it with me, Paula, recently, and it goes like this. It's a Nelson Mandela one. And it is, humility is one of the most important qualities which you must have. Because if you make people realize that you are no threat to them, then they will embrace you. And I think that's exactly what leaders should be doing a hell of a lot more of. And that's why humility plays such a huge part, because people will embrace you and will trust you and will follow you when you demonstrate that level of humility.
That is a nice quote,
It
and it's
is.
very inspiring, actually, and one I will try to remember.
Mm.
Okay, so humility is essentially about respect. It's about humanity. It's about curiosity. So for anyone listening who might be new to a team, they may be new to leadership, or they may even be struggling with a difficult team member, what practical advice can they do today to build character? I'm going back to this subject of character again, Olivia.
Yeah. So that's trust and authenticity, humility, integrity. And what I would say is, and if I'm to give you an example, I have a client right now, and he's brilliant, technically brilliant, very strategic, but he doesn't give any time, any thought to building this whole area of trust. And it is absolutely the reason why he is not progressing into a leadership role. And so for him, it's very much asking, well, how do you build relationships outside of the workplace? What do you do? And it's exploring how open, how caring, how honest, and that's what needs to happen with your team and with your peers. It's showing up, being more honest, being more caring, creating time indeed to nurture those around you. And I think if you can Recognize that it's incredibly important to have people trusting you, and to just create that time and space. I think that's a really good starting point.
It's an interesting concept, actually, to think about nurturing business relationships as you would your friendships.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
again, it might not seem obvious, but it's a very, very interesting way of looking at it. So after character, the second dimension of the Bates model that you mentioned is substance. And you mentioned credibility in relation to substance. Talk to us a little bit about credibility. Again, it might not seem obvious to everybody listening what that is.
Yeah, no, I know. Because again, I'm guessing lots of people are on the call today and they just thought leadership presence is about presenting. And here I am opening an absolute can of worms for people.
Absolutely.
I didn't think it was this complicated. Yeah,
It's really
so
not.
as we said, we've got our three faces of a leader, and we've kind of covered the first one, which is the internal face, I would say. So credibility, credibility explores within a leader the qualities and behaviors that, well, they inspire commitment and they inform how one moves forward. And so what we're looking at here is, your ability to create a compelling vision, your confidence. So in terms of being decisive and being self-assured, composure in a crisis, resonance. And then, we also look at practical wisdom. So just to remind people, there's a couple of late joiners here, under each dimension or under each face of a leader, you've got 5 different behaviors. So yeah, and the last one there is, what should I say, vision and practical wisdom.
Oh, practical wisdom. I mean, that one is just, oh, yeah, that's really hitting me. So talk to me about this one. Is that not an obvious one that a leader should have?
You'd think, right?
It does seem so obvious.
So, yeah, you think, okay, how can this person be a leader if they don't have practical wisdom? So, again, let me unearth this for you. So, practical wisdom looks at how quickly you get to the heart of the problem, you asking the right questions, you strengthening judgment, you foreseeing challenges. So yes, many leaders are very strong in the wisdom associated with all of that. But the other part, it's the one behavior that has 2 words, practical and wisdom. So they may have the wisdom, but the practical piece comes from your ability as a leader to then take that wisdom and hone the messages so that you are influencing your audiences. So it's 2 parts here, wisdom and your ability to communicate that. And what can happen so often, we do a huge amount of work in this area where you've got subject matter experts, perhaps they're technical or from an engineering background or whatever. And it's that ability to influence other audiences. That's where they struggle. So it's that ability. So if we're talking about practical wisdom, it's absolutely about, yes, having the wisdom, but also being able to influence the direction of where the business is going. That's the sweet spot. It is trying to balance that tightrope.
I love that term, sweet spot for leaders. It's a great one. So what advice would you have for listeners who maybe have the wisdom, have all that experience, have all that knowledge in their heads, but then struggle with the ability to communicate all of that and to influence? Maybe, and this is maybe might be a difficult one for you, but could you put into one sentence what advice would you give in one sentence for people like that?
Yeah, give me
I'm
one
sorry. I'm
sentence.
sorry. It's a tough one. Maybe 2. We'll give you 2.
Come on a confident speak course. No, if you wish. No, I think if I'm to give you one sentence, I would say, if we're talking about influence, it's talking about, that practical influence. It's about being absolutely mindful of your audience. And it's keeping them front and center all the time, and that you are meeting the audience where they're at. So that's one
Yeah.
sentence, I think.
Okay. Thank you for that. Thank you. Perfect. That's lovely. So, okay. So as we continue to explore the substance dimension, in your own words, what is vision and how would you describe it?
Yeah, and look, this is always an interesting one. I'll tell you, vision is one of the lowest scoring facets or behaviors in the full assessment,
Really?
in the 360. Yeah, and it looks at your ability as a leader to create an inspiring and a strategic vision. And I think people are very good on the strategic piece, and so there's a little something that jars there with the inspiring piece. And if I'm full transparency here, I did this assessment a number of years ago, and when my results came back, vision was in my lowest scoring behavior. And it's like a stab in the heart.
I can
But
imagine.
because it's you think you've got a good handle on it, and for me to understand, okay, I may have a vision, but I'm not sharing that vision, and I'm not creating a compelling vision for the people around me. So for me, once I picked myself up off the floor, I had to ask myself, okay, I need to carve out space here. I need to carve out space to really think about this. I needed to work with a coach to figure out, okay, well, what is my vision? What's the strategic vision? And how am I making this, how am I making it inspiring for the people around me? So,
And why do you think that was the case? Why do you think, you'd lost your vision, if you like?
yeah,
Is it a case of losing the woods for the trees?
I think I was
Getting too
too,
focused on details?
maybe, I think more so I was too busy working in the business.
Mm,
I think that's so
you need
again,
perspective.
yeah, and even just to step out of it,
Yeah,
which I
that's
do a lot,
yeah,
which I do a lot more of now.
yeah. No, that's good. So what about somebody thinking, I'm just not the kind of person who communicates inspiring vision. That's not my job.
It's
What
not
can
my
they
job.
do?
It's a common one. It's not my job. That's my boss's job to create the vision.
Yeah.
Um, it's above my pay grade. And here's what I think about that. If you are a leader, whether you have two interns or whether you have 2,000 people reporting into you, you absolutely have to have a vision that you keep alive, because the people around you, direct reports and peers, they need to know why what they're doing is important, and that they see a future for the work that they are doing. That if they have that vision, that will then move them to be far more committed. You will be seen as an absolute credible leader, and you will move them into action. So I think the point you make there about this leader who stands up at the town hall and communicates this vision, it doesn't have to be like that. You
Mm,
can communicate your vision to your team in one-to-one meetings. You can communicate it to them on the golf course, in informal coffees, in informal team get-togethers. It doesn't have to be this big moment on stage. Quite the contrary, actually. And I think your team and those around you can help create the inspiring vision. And as I said, strategic can be much, much easier. But how do you make it exciting, and how do you make it interesting? Because that's what will inspire them when they can imagine a future. And that's what will move them to be committed to getting the results for you. That's
and
my belief. It's not an easy one, but it's
no.
absolutely one that absolutely instills credibility in you as a leader. So don't bypass it. Don't think it's somebody else's job. It's your job. You've got 2 interns, you've got 2,000 people, whatever it is, it's keeping that vision alive for them on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, and it's not an easy one. And it's interesting that you say that this you can inspire vision, or
And
you can
yeah,
have
it's,
vision in informal situations as well as,
yeah,
in
yeah.
the in a talk to a team.
It's one I feel very passionate about for the reasons I gave above. It's because it's an absolute blind spot for me. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So before we move on then to our third and final dimension, let's talk about resonance. Again, another one that kind of jars with me a little bit. It also comes under substance. What exactly is resonance? What does
Yeah,
it mean in this
yeah.
context that we're talking about today of
And
leadership presence?
Ariadne, I will agree with you. When I saw resonance, I was like, what is that? And as a trained voice coach, I would talk about resonance a lot, resonating cavities, and that's about sound in space, really. And I thought, is there some kind of a correlation? And I'm not sure if there is. So if I
Hmm.
because it is a kind of what does it really mean? So to give you a sense from the model, it's really about how attuned you are as a leader. So when you enter a room, it's about you picking up that energy in the room. It's about being fully present. So let's just say you go into a team meeting, and as you enter, you really sense something's not right in the room, that you pick up on that and you articulate that in the room. So it's
Okay.
about when you're in a one-to-one, that you are really, really present with the person in front of you, picking up on the body language, what's being said, and what's not being said. It's one of the facets. It's let's just say you're on the call and you kind of think, gee, where should I start with dialing up this leadership presence here? This facet here of resonance is huge because it immediately sends a message to the person you're communicating with that they are seen, they are heard, and that they're being understood. It says, I respect you. There's calmness and there's control in that conversation. So it's a deeper conversation. And I think it's it's just something we kind of think, well, I don't know. We don't think too much about it. We're so busy, right?
I think that's the thing. We don't think about it.
And so many distractions. I mean, right now, I bet people have notifications coming in. They have numerous tabs open. The phone is going. It's just so many distractions. And it's funny, I had a client last week, and again, resonance was an area he really needed to work on. And he just said, "Oh, that's grand, Olivia. I'll just knock off the phone." And I'm like, it's a good start, but you're going to have to think a little bit more about this, and you're going to have to create a little bit more space around this. I love the quote. I just came across it this morning. The quieter you become, the more you're able to hear. It's just so,
Oh, I love that. I love
just so
that.
simple, you know?
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, that
Mm.
really, yeah, I'm gonna look that one up. That's a gorgeous one. So essentially what you're saying here is that resonance is about being receptive and being fully
Yeah,
present, or fully present and receptive.
yeah.
Um, what's the one thing around resonance that could potentially transform a listener's leadership?
Mm. Yeah, or if you kind of want to know what do I need to do? How do I get that? I think,
Yeah.
slow things down. Just slow things down. Don't move immediately into action. So you're really creating space. I would then be brave, call it. Hey, I'm picking up today, Ariadne. You're not, how's everything? I'm just sensing you're a bit off today, and see what comes up. This, it's about being brave and going there. One that I picked up, and it was Bates that shared it with me, was this what's called head, heart, hands. And so what that means is when you're having a conversation with somebody, you're asking, Head questions. So what are you thinking about this? What's going on for you? Heart questions. How are you feeling about that? What's really going on for you? And then hands is, what do we want to do about that? So again, you're not going, it's like we tend to go straight to, okay, problem, solution. But just to create that bit more space is so important. So it, slowing down,
Okay.
creating some space.
Slowing down, creating space, curiosity, and
Yeah,
active listening, they all sound like they're really at the heart of this.
yeah, yeah.
So now we come to the third and final dimension of the leadership presence model. And another one which it strikes me as interesting is style. Style. In the context of leadership presence, you're going to tell me, I know, that style is more than how to simply present yourself to the world, how you dress, how you look every day.
Mm. And again, most people would say style equals, what you're wearing. It's funny. My mum, she's in her 80s, and she's like, "Well, dress for the role you want, not for the role you have." And she's right to an extent. I'll share a story with you. Oh my golly, it came into my mind as I was thinking about this whole style. About I'd say I was starting out in my career as a training consultant, and I was asked to join as a voice coach on this leadership sales program. And on day 3, what they did was they asked the attendees to join all the tables together. So you'd one big long line of tables. And
Okay.
then one after the other, each attendee was asked to get up and walk down the catwalk.
No,
Well,
really?
I died on behalf of them, and I just thanked the Lord that I wasn't asked. But they then were critiqued on their cufflinks, their shirt
Okay.
color, their watch. Everything was critiqued, and I mean, it is a long time ago, and I still come out in a rash thinking about it. But
Gotcha.
I think if we think about style, that back then was how people approached style in terms of leadership. Thankfully, I mean,
We've moved on.
if that happened today, you'd have health and safety police all over you, and then you'd have diversity and inclusion people all over you. You'd have my teenagers all over you giving out about it. So thankfully, that doesn't exist anymore. And I think to come back, Ariadne, style in this model is not about how you look. If it were that simple, no, it style looks at leadership presence in terms of your way of doing things. So getting stuff done, that two-way communication. So what's some of the behaviors here very much look at, are you getting people on the same page? Are the right people around the right table having the right conversations? It was very much about, bringing people together to drive execution. So it's that two-way conversation. People feel they belong, they feel empowered, there's consistency. Again, there's connectedness. So this very much looks at style being your two-way communication, the quality of it, the consistency of it. There's a
Okay, so
lot there.
two-way. There's a lot there, but I think I like that two-way communication, quality, connected, consistent, and driving execution.
Mm.
So, okay, so I'm conscious of time here.
Yeah.
What's one behavior? Where are we at? It's about 3:47. What's one behavior that will resonate with listeners around style that could maybe
Mm.
make a dramatic difference for them, for their leadership presence? Again, I'm putting you on the spot here, I know.
Yeah. So I think what is called in the model, if you've got it there in front of you, is
Mm,
interactivity. And that looks at the quantity and the quality of your communication. So if I was to ask you all right now to open your calendar and look at the meetings that are set up. How structured are they? How valuable are they? How prepared are you? How purposeful are they? So if you think about your one-to-one meetings, for example, could it be done a better way? Could it be done a more efficient way? Is it working for everybody? And I think what needs to happen here is, as you look at your calendar, is to really think, okay, so if I'm going in to meet my boss at the end of the year for a performance review, what is success? What are the different KPIs that I need to achieve? And then you look at your calendar and ask yourself, okay, what's going on with my calendar? What needs to change? So I like to I suggest everyone, I tell everybody this, to do a full audit of what's going on in that diary and look at the quality. And that's what interactivity is all about. So again, looking at consistency, looking at being structured. I had a client there recently and she did the exercise and she was utterly shocked when she realized that all her time was spent on stuff that meant nothing to her end of year appraisal. So again, what you're doing here is you're making it valuable and worthwhile for you and all of the people around you, your direct reports, your peers, your managers. So it's really taking the magnifying glass out and looking at where you're spending your time and is it purposeful?
Yeah, no, it sounds like interactivity is a win for everybody, really. It could seriously improve productivity for everyone, not just for you.
Yeah.
And improve, it saves time wasting.
Yes.
And time wasting is such a frustrating part
And
of every day,
stress
especially in
and
hybrid
burnout.
communications. We
Yeah.
don't have the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, so we've touched on a lot of topics today. We got through a good bit so far.
Mm,
We may have some listeners who joined later on.
yeah.
So for everybody who joined a bit later, can you once again go back and summarize what exactly leadership presence is in this
Mm,
context?
mm.
You defined it beautifully for us earlier on.
Well, I should take the credit for it, but I won't. It was created by the company that I partnered with in the States, Bates Communications, that are now BTS. For those late joiners, it is not presentation skills. It is not charisma. It is none of those things, or they play a very small part. So leadership presence is your ability, so qualities in a leader that engage, inspire, align, and move people into action. And how we do that, how we explore that, is through a beautiful model that was created with looking at the three faces of a leader: character, how you build trust; substance, how you demonstrate credibility; and the final one, style, which is how you inspire action. So, as I said earlier, I'm using the model as a reference point, but I'm not saying people on the call today need to embark on that 360 assessment. It's to look and see what are your strengths and what are your growth areas. And really, as I said earlier, leadership presence and the behaviors go hand in hand with what your goals are as a leader in the business.
Okay, and so finally, as we bring this to a close, what would you like listeners to take away from today? Maybe you could share 3 or 4 things they could do right now, which
Yeah,
might improve their leadership presence.
yeah. I think if you want to look at dialing up your leadership presence, really ask yourself, what is your motivation? So what is it that you really want to achieve? I think that's the first thing. Once you're clear on that, then you can start taking action. I'm reading a book right now by Michael Mosley, and it's sad because the book is called Just One Thing, and it's sad because he passed away so recently. But the whole premise of the book is you just do one thing, and I would say that to anybody on the call today, pick one thing that you would like to focus on, and take it from there. And I will make no apologies for what I'm going to say next. You need to get some support. Pursue leadership coaching around leadership presence. I do think it's lonely at the top in terms of getting feedback. And I think it's so incredibly important to have a thinking partner, to have someone to stretch you, someone to challenge you, and someone to explore leadership presence with you. So, if that's something that interests you, please, contact and certainly start that conversation. So I hope that's helpful for people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I suppose two things that really jump out to me there from what you've said would be to pick your just one thing, to
Mm.
work on, and then get some support.
And I think
That's really important.
knowing that leadership presence is a set of behaviors that can be worked on and can be
Mm,
developed.
they
That is
can be
critical.
learned.
Yeah, exactly.
That's so important.
Yeah,
Okay, well, Olivia, thank you so much for
yeah.
demystifying what is a complicated topic, and I
Welcome.
think you did it very well for us today.
Yeah.
And thank you to everyone who listened and joined us today. You joined because you were curious. So we would love if you were interested in knowing about more about the work that we do with leaders and their teams around this kind of subject, which is leadership presence. Do reach out. You know where we are. You'll find us on LinkedIn. You can drop
Mm.
us a line or drop us a call. Um, so that's it for today. We'll leave the meeting open for a few minutes for any questions that any of you might have. And anyone who does have a question, just raise their hand and we'll try and get to you.